Hey guys, I want to try something different for the next few lessons in that I want to record a few tutorials for you and then allow you to try to follow those tutorials at your own on your own pace. We're going to be learning about some introductory ideas to game design. And to get started, we're just going to be designing a very simple game here, which is a soccer keep up game. When the player plays, the ball is going to fall. The player will move the shoe around to try and make sure that they don't let the ball fall off the screen. Very simple game, but I want to use it to introduce a couple of design problems that turn up again and again when people are programming games, and hopefully discuss a few simple but powerful ideas on how we can deal with some of those issues. All right, so some of the key elements that I want to focus on in this series of tutorials for the soccer keep up game. Key ideas are, first of all, the idea of game states for the program. Games usually have at least a couple of different states that the program can be in. On the screen right now, the game is at the title screen state. But when I press space to play, I imagine that the words at least should disappear and get out of the way. And then I'll be in a different program state, the playing state. So that makes sense as a player for the game, but how are we going to handle that within the code of the game? And how can we handle that sort of cleanly and efficiently? A second key idea that I'll want to focus in on in these tutorials is the idea of how we handle event-driven design, because JavaFX is entirely based on events driving the platform, whereas games maybe often depend on an internal game loop to run the program. For example, a simple game loop might be something along the lines of, as long as the player is not dead, so while the game continues, move all of the pieces on the screen a little bit, check for collisions, and then respond to those collisions. And traditionally, games might have had a while loop written to do those things. Move everything on screen, check for collisions, respond to the collisions, draw the screen. I forgot to mention draw the screen. And then just keep repeating that until the player lets the ball fall. But in JavaFX, if we were to write a while loop like that, we would not be leaving space for the JavaFX platform to do all the things like check for keyboard or mouse interactions that it does, and it would actually become very inefficient. Instead, what we need to do is we need to work with the event-driven design of JavaFX and figure out how to have that animation running through events. That's the first big event driven problem that we're going to face. And the other one is keyboard polling. How do we check to see what keys are being held down? Because when you're playing a game, you typically don't want to be repeatedly pressing keys. I wouldn't want to, for example, have to use the left arrow to move my foot and type left, 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 left. I just want to push down left and hold it and then release it when I want the shoe to stop moving. But there's only two events there, pressing the key and releasing the key. In my program, how can I know that the key is being held down at the instant that I want to know the key is being held down instead of having to rely on an event? Right? And the last big key idea that I want to deal a little bit with here is the idea of game engine design. Many of the problems, the programming problems that come up in designing a game, are very repetitive problems that happen in every game. For example, for this game, we're going to need to design a sprite class to handle the ball and the shoe. But I want to design generic classes that I could then use again and again and again in any game that I wanted to write. And when I put together a whole bunch of generic classes like that and provide the methods that all sprites would be able to use, what I'm really designing is at least a part of a game engine. A game engine in a tradition or in a real world sense like the Unreal game engine or the Unity game engine, is a huge set of classes that is put together to solve all of the very common problems in game design. When you're talking about Unreal or Unity, we're talking about things like how do I place 3D characters into a 3D world, and what's all of the game physics and the mathematics to draw 3D characters to make all that stuff work. Well, all of the 3D animation stuff would be the same no matter what game you're designing, or at least would be very similar no matter what game you're designing. And so, if we can put all of that, encapsulate all of that complex mathematics for 3D animation into a bunch of classes already, and then just use those classes for our unique purposes, that's this sort of the idea behind what designing a game engine does is takes all of those common problems to all games and encapsulates them into a set of classes and then provides access to those classes through an API to allow us to um, design our games much more simply. Now, we're not going to use Unity or Unreal Engine to design this game. Instead, what I want to think about is a little touch, just a really brief touch, into what are some of the ideas that a game engine creator might be thinking about and how they're designing, and how can we create elements of our own game engine. We won't make a full featured game engine, but we'll make a small one that we could reuse and continue to add on to throughout this project and maybe a few others that come after it. So I hope you enjoy this introduction to game design, and let's start thinking about how to make the program.